My short film, Chapel of Rest, is coming to the end of its festival run, and I'm trying to decide what to do next. Do I do another short, or do I try my hand at another low, no-budget feature? The problem is, raising funds to make another feature film is so hard because you don't actually have a proper feature film to your name already. It's like, in order to get funding for a feature, you have to have made a feature. It's quite a vicious cycle. So do I try and get a short film funded because I have quite a lot of evidence to show that I can make short films, or do I try my hand at making a feature film? Now, I've made 2 feature films before in the past. I've made one called Towns, and I've made one called The Last British Execution. Now, personally, I think I made Towns far too soon. I just got my first job in television. I'd been working as a cameraman, and I thought I could jump into it and make a feature film for next to no money with some actor friends of mine. And it was such a steep learning curve making Towns. I'm glad I did it now looking back, because I did learn a lot. But you can see from the short films that I've made after Towns how much I've learned in such a very short space of time. I think prior to making Towns, I'd made one short, which was called The Jumper, and I made that straight out of university. Incidentally though, The Jumper is probably the most expensive short film I've ever made because it was shot on Super 16mm film. So after Towns, I made 2 shorts. I made Tea Break, and I made Death Comes to Us All. And just by looking at those 2 comedy shorts, you can see how much I've improved in such a short space of time. Then I was lucky enough to meet someone who worked for the British Youth Film Academy, and I was able to pitch them a feature film. So my feature film, The Last British Execution, got greenlit. However, that wasn't made in the traditional film sense. Basically, it was the backdrop to film education for college students. So the idea was that students came and lived in a college campus, lived and breathed filmmaking for about 5 weeks, and basically made this feature film, the Execution movie. So The Last British Execution movie was made in an education setting. So because of this, we couldn't take risks. The main draw of the feature film being made was that the students' education came first and not the film. So it didn't matter if the film was terrible, as long as the students had a great time making it. Now, luckily, we ended up making a really good film, but we were made with certain restrictions. So we couldn't take chances on the script, it had to be fairly safe. And at the end of the day, the film was granted a 12A rating by the BBFC, which tells you how safe the film was. But I really appreciated getting the chance to make a feature with the students, because I learned something. And every film I make, I learn something. It's a continual progression going on. You can see from film to film that you're getting stronger. So after British Execution, I went on and made a few more shorts. I made Forever Manchester. Forever Manchester is based on true events of the Manchester bombing that happened a few years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. My wife and I heard about the event, and we were constantly refreshing our social medias to get updates constantly about what had happened. We knew a few people that were at the event. Luckily, they were unharmed. But then that thought crept into your head, is what happens if your own child had been at that event? And that's where that idea for that film came from. It was quite a massive shift for me. It wasn't a comedy, it was serious drama, and we got quite a moderate success. It was shown at quite a few film festivals. And then I went on to make Dear John, I'm Sorry. Now, Dear John is based on an actual news article I saw on the internet about a couple that basically both taken their own lives because one of them had a terminal illness and neither wanted to be alone. I changed quite a few details so it didn't reflect the actual events of what happened, but we just borrowed the gist of the true events and made Dear John. I was so proud of Dear John. It went all around the world. It was shown in America. I think it went to Canada, Australia, and all over the UK. And that's when I thought, I'm ready to make a feature film now. But stupidly, I'd taken a pre-workout for the gym far too late in the afternoon and I couldn't sleep. And I ended up having this nightmare. The nightmare I had was, I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to spoil Chapel of Rest for you. But let's just say how Chapel of Rest turns out is the nightmare that I had. So I reversed engineered the script for Chapel of Rest, and I thought this is too good not to make. So I was really, really lucky that a friend of mine recommended 2 actors, Kyle and Sydney, for the 2 roles, and they were a dream to work with. And the location in Hindley was amazing. It was just such a great learning opportunity. And I think to this point, Chapel of Rest is probably the best film that I've made. So if you look at the majority of my short films, they're usually always very similar. They're usually a two-hander in one location. Now, I don't know if that's a throwback to when I did theatre studies at A-level and we were learning monologues and duologues. But I think that that's the limit. That's what's held me back as a filmmaker, that I have not had more characters in more locations. So I want to expand, I want to grow as a filmmaker. So that's why I've decided to do a feature film next. I think a lot of inspiration has come from working on a couple of low budget features recently. A friend of mine, Mike Clark, asked me for help, and I worked a few days on a low budget feature called The Stranger, which has just come out in America. And I helped out a lot more on a film called A Light Through Coloured Glass, which hopefully should have finished post-production very soon. And that kind of relit a fire in myself to basically get myself back out there and start making feature films again, because that's what I've always wanted to do. That's the dream that I've always had. It's the only thing that's ever held you back is the lack of money, a budget, not having one. But the problem is, in this day and age, that people won't give you funding budget unless you've already made a film. So in order to make a film, you've got to make a film. So I'm going to have to make the feature film very similar to how I made the shorts. Basically, beg, borrowing and stealing. So I've got no excuse not to make the feature film. I've got the kit, I'm shooting on it now. I've got the audio here, I've got my lights. Why aren't I making a feature film? The script is currently being developed, currently being written. I'm looking at locations, I'm looking at actors. So here we go, the first step, putting out there, letting people know we're making a feature film. Keep checking back. I'll keep you updated with casts, crews, locations, how we're getting on, how we shot it, how we're editing it, what we're going to do, how we're selling it, how we're getting it to an audience. Keep coming back to keep up to date with the latest news on this film.